Good evening. So I wanted to make a video a little different for you guys. I wanted to talk about Sasquatch and the evidence for it. More often than not, I get a lot of comments and people who are kind of new at this that go, well, yeah, that's great. You're talking about, the different types of Bigfoot or their ranges, but you know that they don't exist, right? There's not one scrap of evidence. There's not one bit of proof. No one's ever proven these things are real. And I don't fault people for saying that. It's purely an ignorance. Now, I'm not calling people dumb or stupid because that's not what it is. It's purely an ignorance. If anybody who's looked into the subject long enough realizes that there is plenty of evidence for Sasquatch. Now, the big thing that I always hear, especially after they look at this evidence and they hear me tell them about it and then they look into it, is they kind of throw up their arms and say, well, I'm just not going to believe it until they have a body. And for me, I think I got to look at it like a court case, like the preponderance of evidence, beyond a shadow of a doubt kind of a thing. And I think we can pretty much do that without a body. And I just wanted to go over today some of the reasons I always quote, some of the things I always talk about when people want the best evidence to prove that it's real. And I'd like to share it with you guys today. So this evidence isn't in any particular order. And like I said, this is also great for people. If you have a friend who's on the fence, maybe email them this video. But so the first bit of evidence I'm going to talk about is hair samples. People find hair samples all the time. People have sightings. People find footprints. People see them looking in their windows and get caught on a nail or on the edge of a board or on a barbed wire fence. People find hair. And it's no mystery when people find hair that it doesn't look quite like anything in the area. There's no horses in the area. It's too long to be deer or some kind of a ungulate species. And most people should know that there is a difference between hair and fur, fur being very short and being very dense and hair being a lot finer. Think of like the hair on your head versus like the hair on like a lab. So there's a few different characteristics about Sasquatch hair. It's not quite like human hair, but it's not quite like ape hair. It's kind of somewhere in between. And it seems to have kind of a blondish red to darkish brown appearance. And there's different reasons for this. Our hair compared to their hair, as you can see here, theirs kind of looks like a bigger, more rough version of our hair. And sometimes they can have a little more translucent qualities to them. Sometimes they can be very dark, like darker than dark people describe. Who knows if that's just different varieties. Like you could have a very light colored black bear, a very dark black bear, kind of the same thing, I would assume. But yeah, we got plenty of hair samples. And it's always amazed me when people send in hair samples and they don't come back with anything or it's inconclusive. Well, that's because if you know how hair sampling works, is they compare it to known species. So they compare it to deer, black bear, elk, moose, whatever's in the area, and then even outside of the area of the United States, and then even around the world, they'll compare it to different hair samples that they have on file. And it comes back as unknown. Well, naturally, if they don't have any documented Sasquatch hair, they can tell that it's maybe organic. They can tell that maybe it's human-like, but they can't say for sure that it's a Bigfoot. Well, it's because they don't have anything to compare it against. But yes, we have lots of hair samples, and it's very intriguing evidence. So the other thing, it's kind of funny to talk about, but the other thing people find their scat. They find their droppings, especially in areas that don't have bears or even mountain lions look completely different, and it doesn't match up to any chart, and it looks essentially like human scat, but like 4 or 5 inches around, like absolutely huge and gigantic. And people just are like, wow, what is that? Well, Sasquatch, being a real flesh and blood creature, does need to relieve itself, and it is found from time to time. And I did a whole video on it a while back, but you could also use it to extract DNA, or if you want to take samples of it, that's up to you. But yeah, people do find mysterious looking large scat all the time that would match up to a Sasquatch-like creature. So one of the most controversial pieces of evidence is Sasquatch DNA. Melba Ketchum a while back, about 2013, published her findings from hair samples and I believe a few other sources. They sequenced the Sasquatch genome and they found some very, very odd things. And what they found, I think they found was some extra chromosomes. They found that it was half human in origin, which you would expect from a vaguely human upright walking ape. And the other part of it was out of this world. They don't know what it was. It was something completely different, something that made no sense genetically, nothing that matched up with anything else, not monkey or ape or human. And she published these results. And naturally, when you publish something that's unknown, the scientific community laughed at her and thrown her out. And it was really quite sad, because if she was making it up, why wouldn't she just said it was half gorilla and half human? Or say it looked like a Neanderthal or something. So I truly believe her study. I think it points that these things have something that we don't quite understand. Some people think that the other half of the DNA was Nephilim or some kind of engineered species or something else. I don't know what it is for sure, but I do know that her DNA study was believable, was correct, and she was a full genetic scientist, PhD. She knew what she was doing. And the fact that she got laughed out of there was just a product of society, not had anything to do with her work. And I think it's a real shame. So the other bit of evidence that seems very obvious in how Bigfoot got its name was track cast. And not only do we have cast of feet, but we also have cast of hands, and we have cast of knuckles. Lots of different variations in their footprints, and it's very easy to spot a fake because all the footprints will be uniform. If you have a rigid cast on your foot, the toes will be dug in compared to the rest of the foot. And there's lots and lots of cast out there from all over the place, lots of variations. But one of the major things you will notice, one of the things that a lot of these things have in common, sometimes you get three-toed, sometimes you get four-toed tracks, is that they're all flat-footed. They're all a very wide, very broad foot. They tend to have a flexible midfoot, which leaves a mid-tarsal break in the ground of the print, just because they have a little different physiology. Their leg bones and ankle bones are placed a little bit more towards the center of the foot, which would make sense for a bigger, larger creature to support that weight. And if you look at the Patterson-Gimlin film and other so-called footage of them moving, you can see that there's a lot of that it's not a natural human gait, the way that they pick up their feet. And that brings me perfectly into the Patterson-Gimlin film, which I'm showing you here. If you've listened to Dr. Meldrum, if you've listened to Dr. Bendernagel, if you've listened to many Bigfoot people who are into this, if you've watched other breakdown videos from other YouTubers, it is pretty unanimous that this is not a guy in a suit. She is a real creature. You cannot recreate this movement. You cannot do this, especially in 1967. If you look at the way the ankle comes up off the ground, the way her arms are swinging, it is not a reproduction. You cannot duplicate this, the way the muscles move, the way that the length of the arms, the human proportions. Patty is the real deal, and probably one of the single best pieces of evidence. Being 50 years old, people always ask me about the Patterson-Gimlin film. Well, why haven't we been able to film Patty again? Well, I think there's a lot of government interference and people who necessarily don't want that to come out. And I think if you had full crystal from 50 feet away, crystal clear, 1080p, full modern video of a Sasquatch, people would just discount you as a hoax anyway, which is really kind of sad in the internet era. It's really easy to discount somebody because anybody can just cast accusation. Anybody can just leave in the comments or say, oh, it's a fake, without any evidence proving otherwise. So I think that's one of the reasons why the Patterson-Gimlin film has been around for so long. The other thing that I think is a very impressive piece of evidence that is often overlooked, but if you're into this, you'll know it, is the Sierra Sounds by Ron Moorhead. He created it in the late 70s in the northern Sierras at a remote hunting camp. Him and his buddies were out at night, and they just got inundated with all sorts of noise and knocks and things pounding on their little wood shack. And they've been back to the location several times. Recently, this last year, though, the last few months ago, in a big fire, the camp burnt down. But the Sierra Sound stand is one of the greatest pieces of evidence out there, and we're going to play a little bit for you here. Now, I know that was just a snippet, but I've seen his presentations. I've talked to the man in person, Ron Moorhead, and he's had it independently audited, researched, and the sounds that are being made, because there are some sounds, if you listen to the whole thing, it's 4 or 5 minutes long, or the whole Sierra sounds. It's him and his buddy actually call back and kind of talk to the creatures back and forth. And you can hear the creatures producing sounds that no human can produce because they have a recording and they analyze the vocal structures and at different frequencies, at different rates that humans cannot reproduce and call. And it also has signs of language. He had linguistical experts that work for the military decoding foreign languages and decoding different type of spy stuff, and he had them look at the Sierra sounds, and he could tell that there are traces of language, that these things were actually talking back and forth. Now, they probably had his little hut surrounded, and they're probably talking back and forth. Hey, there's humans out in the middle of nowhere. Hey, let's mess with them. And they're howling and hooting, and there's probably different age variants and different types all in there, pretty much messing with them, and the fact that they were calling back, and I think they were having a conversation about it. Now, the linguistical experts don't know what they were saying, but they knew that there are true signs of language there. Truly fascinating. There's lots more to talk about with this, but I'm just going to say, for me, it is a very convincing piece of Bigfoot evidence. Now, for me, one of the biggest things that people cannot ignore is that tens of thousands of people every year see Sasquatch. It's probably close to hundreds of thousands of people see Sasquatch. The vast majority of people, it's a roadside crossing, something runs across the road, or they're out hunting and they see what looks like an 8 or 10 foot tall man walking through the bushes, or they catch a glimpse of something, or something tapped on their house, or they hear a tree knock and something, maybe they catch a glimpse of something. And most people don't report it. And even if you look at where would you report it, like I've had encounters and I've never reported them to anybody. So you got to remember that even when you look at maps of reported sightings, you got to think for every one, there's probably 200 or 300 in that area. And just because you see parts of this map here that you don't necessarily see any reports, I guarantee you there are probably Bigfoots there. It's just you have to have people to have sightings, and there are parts of the U.S. that are still sparsely populated. So, and you look at the BFRO, which is kind of the biggest piece of inventory that we have. Now, the BFRO is not perfect. They do have a catalog, and I've known people that have contacted them for their reports and never got a call back. But then again, it's a good starting point. If you're new to an area or you're trying to research an area, start at the BFRO website. They break it down by country, the United States and Canada. They break it down by state, then they break it down by county. And they go through all the reports and descriptions. And it's, like I said, a good starting point, but not all-inclusive. Bottom line, every year, police officers, firefighters, judges, lawyers, housewives, doctors, whoever you want to put in your life as a trustworthy or honorary source, people see these things every single day and see them all the time. And for me, that's an overwhelming amount of evidence. They say in a court of law, eyewitness evidence is one of the lowest forms. Well, if something happens and 10,000 people see it, but there's no physical evidence, that's pretty damning. So I think that's pretty much the case here for Bigfoot as well. The other thing you have to look at is historically. When the first white man came over to North America, even Leif Erikson had encounters with Sasquatch, or these big hairy men, and he said it would be a problem in colonizing it. A lot of settlers encountered these things, and before the settlers, we had the Native Americans. We had them they were here for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, and some of their cultures say that Bigfoots were there before them even. So, and it's virtually every tribe. Virtually every tribe in the continental United States has their version of a Bigfoot or a hairy man or their version of it. And way up north, they have, and it's pretty much the same fitting description as an upright walking ape. Now, some of them have a little bit more of a benign, we stay away from them, they stay away from us. Some of them classify them more as a trickster. Some tribes say that they're more like a boogeyman. If you stay in during the night, you'll be okay. If you're out wandering around at night or misbehaving, they'll abduct you, like the tales of the Zunaqua. And in other cultures, they have a lot more friendly type perception, where they traded with them and they worked with them. Sometimes you even hear stories of them when other cryptids having encounters and the Bigfoots, and they're just being all the strange stuff in the woods. And to them, it's just another tribe of people. And a lot of Native American tribes viewed them as tribes of people. Not all. Some view them more as an animal. But I think it's quite fascinating that some tribes have histories of trading with them and leaving them offerings. And then other tribes also have histories of them being very violent, or they're describing them as like cannibal giants and monsters, and stay out of the woods. And it's quite fascinating that there's such a spectrum of the way they describe these creatures, but in fact they are describing a creature that we would call Bigfoot. And I think that's very important. Then you start looking worldwide. You start looking at South America, going all the way through Central America and Mexico, all the way up through Canada and Alaska. Then you hop over to Europe, all through Russia, China, the Himalayas, with the Yetis, the Yeren, the Yowie, the Almasty, ogres, trolls, you name it, the orang pendek. It seems like every place, even in Africa, there seems to be their version of a large, upright, walking, hairy man or hairy creature, or their version of a Bigfoot. So it seems to be a worldwide phenomena, and it's quite fascinating that they're all describing something very similar. Now, they may have different attributes, but they're generally a large, upright, walking ape. And for me, when you combine all this evidence together, from hair to DNA to the Patterson-Gimlin film to tens of thousands of sightings to a lot of other potentially valid video and audio recordings, if you look online and on YouTube and everywhere else, to me, there's overwhelming evidence. Not to mention, if you get out there and you spend enough time in the woods, you just might see one yourself. So hope this answers some questions for you guys. Also, once again, to hit on it again, a lot of people say we won't be satisfied till we have a body. And I think that might be coming soon. I think somebody's going to shoot one or going to hit one with a car. And before the government can come take it away, or before people can disprove it, they're going to haul it in front of a news van. And I think it's going to happen. I think at some point the truth is going to come out here, probably in the next 10 to 15 years, hopefully. Because I think these creatures need protection, and I think we need to be educated ourselves about what they are. So thank you very much. If you like what you saw here, please give this video a thumbs up, and think about subscribing if you haven't already. And please stay safe in the woods, folks. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can find me at unstellar.com. You can also find me at twitter.com at realmattsquatch. This is where I post notifications for new videos outside of YouTube. And I'm also on Instagram. I post other random pictures here too, and sometimes some stuff about Bigfoot as well. And you can always email me at mattsquatchpresents@gmail.com.